So hi, Erin. Dr. Erin is a naturopathic doctor and focuses on teen health. And so we're talking today about teens and mental health and the specific cases that you might see, or the specific situations you might see facing teens with regards to mental health.
Mm-hmm.
We know that mental health diagnoses usually emerge in adolescence in many cases. And so this is a period of time where people are very susceptible um, to these budding diagnoses, and this is often where healthcare practitioners have an opportunity to step in and shape the rest of someone's health journey, essentially.
Yes. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That is the opportunity is understanding what could be going on during this period of time, because their brain is so susceptible and vulnerable, essentially, that we want to be able to walk them through it in the most helpful way, so that, like you said, into adult, like their health journey is positively affected. Right? So they understand what like health and wellness is, and that amazing foundation is what we really want to encourage and what we're trying to
Right.
build.
It's like the first thread in that whole narrative of what's, my anxiety. And step
Mm-hmm.
one was when I was 15, I was first diagnosed. What was that experience like? Who was the first person? I know that they have early psychosis teams at the Canadian Medical Association. Oh no, the Canadian Mental Health Association, and it's a team with a social worker and a psychiatrist, and it's like this early intervention team to get that narrative moving in a positive direction, hopefully, with the first psychotic episode, if someone's susceptible to that.
Yeah.
But you were mentioning the teen brain, and maybe we could dive into that.
Yeah. So the teen brain it's a whole thing in all of its own. That's how you say that. So basically what's happening is so they're moving from childhood to adulthood, and it's this period we call adolescence, and there's a big range, and it's not just about puberty and changing hormones. The changing brain is happening on top of all of that. And what's really happening is during infancy and childhood, your brain builds a bunch of mass, all the things are there, and then during adolescence it starts to prune, and it starts to develop the pathways that it really needs for adulthood, and all the higher level functioning, all the higher level thinking and functioning that we need. So decision making, and kind of seeing in the future, understanding how things will react and consequences, and all of that higher level ability to process information. So really adolescence is pruning back all of the bulk and really honing in on the pathways that we want to focus on. So that's where it becomes really important, for early intervention, is if they're stuck in negative thought patterns, or more anxiety driven thought processes, or the way they're impacted by stress, then we really want to start right away. But no, let's change this conversation, and let's really focus on how we can adapt that and help prune your brain in a way that's going to set it up for success as an adult.
It's so interesting how the brain works, right? It's so much of it is about getting rid of what's not relevant. And it's all about what the brain is not doing. Inhibition is really a big part of the action of the brain. So in teenhood, it's it's not that you're developing new neural pathways, you're pruning. You're getting rid of neural pathways that are that are not serving, or that are too heavy and you don't need.
Yeah, it's trying to streamline things, right? And it's also gearing you up to move away, get it, leave the nest too, right? So you have to develop, you don't need to be dependent on another human. You're in this process of learning how to care for yourself, and learning how to make sense of the world by yourself, and learning how to make connections outside of your home, and all these things you have to do to be a successful adult. And really what happens is the brain, it remodels kind of from the base up. So at the base is our most base level, which is the pure fight or flight, keeps you safe, right? It's there for a reason. And it's all, so as it starts to as this change is happening, teens are very amygdala based, which means that everything that comes at them is basically perceived as a threat, which is why you're getting the more intense reactions. They seem snippier, or there's more eye rolling, or all those things, because literally everything that's coming at them is oh, saber-toothed tiger. And they react like that, right? Because they haven't redeveloped yet the higher parts of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is helping them sift through, oh, that's not actually a threat. Oh, when you asked me what I wanted for dinner, that wasn't dangerous. That was just you asking me what I wanted to eat, right? So there's these things that are happening, but people often attribute that to like, oh, teens are just hormonal, and they brush it off. And then there's a huge missed opportunity, right? Like when teens are in that reactionary state, it's an amazing opportunity to practice that higher level thinking and helping them learn how to sift through the actual dangers versus the safe things. And the more we can practice that, the better the pruning process, and the better they're able to do that as they get older. Yeah.
So interesting. Right. So it's like, what do you want for dinner? And the teen brain is going to see that as, what do you mean by that? If it's a threat, it's like, I'm looking for your motivation. I'm suspicious about you, and I'm going to respond to you in a way that holds that as like an assumption. Like, so you're somehow judging me, you're somehow attacking me. And so and you're confused why I'm being hostile or irritable towards you. You're like, I just wanted to know if you wanted potatoes or.
Yeah, exactly. But they're just pursuing everything as just more intense, which is also the beauty of adulthood. And Dan Siegel is one person I read a lot about. He has this amazing book called Brainstorm. And I love it. And it really explains, he does a really good job of explaining this in a very like easy to understand way of like what's happening, and then how are we helping these processes go through. And he terms it like the essence of adolescence. And each letter in essence stands for something. So it's like the ES is emotional. Hold on, I can never remember all of them. It's emotional spark. So that's their like, they have this emotional spark, which is also amazing, and it creates meaning and vitality. And like often as adults, we miss that emotional spark, that intensity, right? It's like why we like watching certain movies, because it helps evoke those emotions. But teens have this really fast access to it. So part of it is like not squashing that, but just helping them to hone it to like I said, sift through danger versus not danger, and not being rude or dismissive or disrespectful to other people in an intense way.
Yeah, it's and like you don't want to like prune those synapses necessarily.
No,
like the intensity of your first love, or like your passion, your dreams, your idealism.
Yeah, and then the other is social engagement. So teens, the biggest thing, and which is difficult going on what's happening in the world right now, because they're really focusing on building connections outside of their home. And it's really important to them to essentially find another tribe, like, and to be able to, because that means safety, like safety in numbers. They need to be able to distance themselves from like the family home to learn how to be an adult, but it's also safer when with your group of people and you're learning and you're connecting, and they're also going through the same thing. So they understand you in a different way. So it's really important for them to be able to build those, and also sets them up for in future being able to build like more meaningful relationships. So letting them practice that and work through that. So that's the ES, the SE, and then the N of essence is novelty. And we all know that teens love seeking out new experiences, and it's part of their brain is very dopamine based. So like the thrill and like the quick, they want that dopamine hit, and it's not necessarily they have like more or less dopamine. It's just that they're more sensitive to it, and it makes you feel good, right? Like that dopamine, like it's like people do things. That's why teens are also like at higher risk for like addictions of all sorts, right? So the key here is like, this is a great part of their essence, because like it's important to be able to engage fully with all of your senses and like seek out that new behavior. It also helps people think of new ideas and think outside the box. Like we want them to keep that love of novelty there, but helping them find ways to do it in a safe way. Right? It's like learning new skills, or like trying riskier behaviors, but like in a safer way. Like you don't want them just out like racing a car down the street, but like if you like fast things, and what are some sports we can get you into that are fast paced, or like can we go to a track and practice these things? And that kind of goes into their idea of like creative exploration, and they're starting to learn like their abstract reasoning, and they can be hyper rational. So it's this great opportunity. Again, they see the world through like a different lens, and they intentionally want to, and they want to think it to the box. And it's part of them why they push back against the rules and the boundaries the parents set us. And that's part of their ability to split from childhood into adulthood, is intentionally pushing back on those things. And again, that can be safe or it can be dangerous. So it's always a fine line of like, okay, I want you to try new things. I want you to think it's the box. I want you to have this abstract thinking. But again, how can we be creative in helping you have that outlet, but keeping you safe? And that's always kind of where it goes. But Dan Siegel's book Brainstorm does such a great job of like walking parents through that. And when you read it, it's so inspiring. Like, yes, that is what I want from my teen. I want them to live an adult life that's fulfilling and full of like emotion and passion and new ideas and like that, like finding your purpose, so to speak. Which when you have adults that come into your practice, it's common people get stuck in a rut and they're bored and they don't have those things happening. So I think it's a good reminder, like, yes, we want this and we want people to carry this essence throughout their life.
And it's like, it doesn't have to go with that emotional volatility and the irritability and the bad behavior. It's like, these are separate things. And I think we might get confused by confounding them all into one thing. It's like, oh, well, yeah, you're idealistic and you're emotional and you're intense, but you're also super irritable and you scream at me when I ask you what's for dinner. But it's like, no, we can keep the essence.
Exactly.
We can prune away or just help to emotionally regulate that amygdala response.
That's really what it is. And a lot of it is coaching the parents and the teens. It's a practice because a lot of how the generations are going, like people who of age who have teens right now are typical, they didn't get any emotional support. Like that's a generalization because I'm sure some people did, but for the most part, like it wasn't talked about and only girls had to be emotional and boys couldn't be emotional. Luckily that's shifting. So it's like, and we're starting to understand, oh, all emotions are good, right? Even anger or jealousy or disappointment or sadness, like they're all emotions we all need to learn how to feel and understand, and then like learn what to do with them. And that's the first big step with families I work with is like, I'm sure I don't know if people have heard like the name it to tame it. I mean, you probably, even if you had like when your kids are toddlers, you might have heard of it. It's a common thing with like toddlers. It's like, oh, try to get them to say how they're feeling. Because as soon as we can put a name to it, then it's easier to get to action. And once we can get into action, we can move through it. But if you're just stuck in the feeling and the emotion, then you can never get through it. And then it leads to like a cyclical, like anxiety picture or something like that. Right. So that's the first clue is like, okay, can we just name our emotions? And often what I have people do is, and you can Google this, it's super easy. You look up emotion color wheel. And it's just like a wheel of like all the different ways you could describe an emotion. And they're usually attached to color, like anger is red and sadness is blue. And there's this color wheel. And I have people like put it up, start using it, even as a parent, because the biggest first mistake people make is they just say, well, I'm upset. But that doesn't help us get to action because upset can mean a lot of things. For example, I comment talk about like, are you mad or are you sad? Right? Because when you're mad, what do you want to do? Well, I need space and I want to punch a pillow or scream or whatever. But when I'm sad, I actually want to be closer to someone and I want to hug. So if you're just saying I'm upset, then you're not ever able to get the action, or you're going to act in the wrong way. If they're upset and they're mad and you go to hug them, that's going to like elevate it. Versus if they're sad and you give them space, then they're going to feel more sad and like more disconnected, right? So it's just like being able to specify an emotion is shown that helps work through any emotion, just even by being able to put a name to it.
Yeah, it's so great. It's so important, right? It's like that first step is just to name it, because not only does it allow us to then create the appropriate response or respond to someone's emotion in the appropriate way, but to externalize it. It's like, oh, anxiety's here. It's very different from just me acting anxious, you know?
Yeah. Being versus feeling, and it's not who you are. It's a feeling, right?
Exactly.
Like being able to externalize is great. And it's funny that you bring up that. Is one thing I was just learning about the other day was teens often what will happen too is they like to externalize their emotions, not necessarily like consciously, but because they're feeling a lot and they're feeling a lot of big things, they will kind of externalize their emotions onto their parents. And that's the common is like, oh, I came home and the kid got a bad grade on their test, but the kid didn't seem upset about it. So the parent's upset, and it was like, you know, this never happened. They usually get good grades, but now they don't seem like they care. And that's so unlike them. Like, why don't they care? And so they put all their upset emotions, and the parent is like spiraling. But sometimes the teen just needs a break. So it's finding, like, trying to notice these small things that happen instead of like you intensely reacting. Like, you kind of have to model, okay, this is how I'm going to deal with this emotion and this reaction, and then work through to problem solve.
It's probably one of the biggest things I see in my practice. I don't see a lot of teens, but sometimes they'll be brought in by their family members, and I work with teens and adolescents, and it's usually the family saying, my teen is out of control, or all these big emotions, and I'm wondering if they have bipolar disorder, or they wonder what their hormones are doing. And it's the exact same thing that you're talking about, where it's this emotional dysregulation that is upsetting to families, especially if they don't know what's going on or how to frame it.
Yeah. The best, I just recently read a passage from, what's her name? I have her book here somewhere. Lisa D'Amour. She focuses a lot on teen girls, mostly, like female mental health and stuff. But she talks about, like, we have this idea of, like, okay, it's adolescence or teenagehood. The whole family's going to hop on the roller coaster. We're going to white knuckle it to the end and then just hop off. And then we're going to just hope that that teen hops off as a grounded, functioning adult. But you're missing this whole opportunity to, like, experience the ride, enjoy the ride, instead of, like, white knuckling it. And that's what people do. Like, I gotta survive it. And we don't want people to survive. We want people to thrive. Right?
Like, the whole family, like you said, like, it's good for the parents too. Like, imagine how much emotional intelligence you can gain from trying to instill emotional intelligence in your teen too.
Yeah. And that's usually, everyone has to learn it. Right. And it's something that you don't just learn at one time.
Right.
It's an ongoing practice, right? And you get better at it, like any skill, and you'll get quicker to, like, get to that point, or being able to rationalize, like, the high intensity of emotions, or learn to feel more intense emotions if you haven't been. Right? Like, as intense as teenagehood is, it's also exhilarating to feel all those things. Right. And we got to find that middle ground.
It's just, like, coming to mind, like, if you're, an adult who is not comfortable with anger, and then you have a teen, now you're blessed with a teen who is, that's like a go-to emotion, let's say, or a prominent emotion, then it's reworking this whole anger system within yourself as well as a family unit. It's like, it's a great therapy opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's huge. And they really are looking at you as the model, even though you don't think that they are, because it seems like they don't want really a lot to do with you. But it is, and you can try, and of course people are like, oh, I want to connect, and I want to ask questions, and I want to have these conversations, but I'm getting, like, stonewalled. And it's like, that will happen. Right. And it's also to, like, look at when and how you're asking questions. Like, if they're engaged in something, or, they're relaxing and resting, like, don't always just bombard them with questions either. Like, you have to also start respecting that they're their own person in space. So you have to kind of, and what parents do is they'll often question with kind of like an ulterior motive, like they're digging for something. It's like, and the teens, they got a nose for that. Like, just be honest, ask some questions, and be truly curious and not judgmental. Like, come at it from, like, I'm curious and I want to get to know, but I'm not going to judge or, like, put anything down that you tell me, sort of thing. Because that's usually the biggest fear. Like, I don't want to tell my parents because of how they're going to react. So you really have to practice, like, the neutral reaction.
Totally, right? Because it's like, sometimes you might hear something that, whoa, as a parent, but I think that's a good point, right? It's like, and often it's like, how was your day? How was school? These open-ended questions that don't necessarily invite a connection necessarily, right? They're maybe too open-ended, too vague, or they have an ulterior motive, as you said. And you mentioned, so name it to tame it. So naming emotions when they come up, and teaching teens how to do that, and doing that, modeling that behavior. And then also, being honest. So really understanding if you have an ulterior motive for certain questions, and curiosity, non-judgment, all these good things. Tell me other things about how to, encourage emotional intelligence and how to create that pruning process in a healthy way.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the biggest, is like modeling, the name entertainment. I'm trying to think what else I usually go through. And just to keep showing up and keep trying. And this is what happens, is parents will try, like, a technique, like, once. And of course they didn't get the reaction they wanted. It's like, no, you have to keep trying all the time. and over and over. And you're going to screw up and you're going to flip your lid and you're going to get upset. And that's a great time to model. Of like, okay, how am I going to calm myself down? I'm going to take a few deep breaths, or I need to go outside for a walk. Like, these are all things that your teen is watching you do of how to emotionally regulate yourself. Right. So they might not take your advice of like, oh, you're stressed, right? Like, you got a lot on your plate and you seem really stressed right now. So why don't you go for a walk or go to this? You might get an eye roll out of that. But when you say, I'm stressed, or I'm feeling this way, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to go do some stretching, I'm going to take a hot bath, whatever you can do. So really like modeling behaviors that are showing how to regulate and saying it out loud. So just kind of like almost try to talk your inner monologue out loud.
That's really
even when it comes like decision making, when you're like, because they don't yet have that prefrontal cortex, they're very more impulsive, and they go on like immediate feeling versus like weighing up the consequences, because they don't have that higher level rationality yet. They need practice and they need examples. So if you're trying to make a decision and you're like, and then you can start to question like, oh, what do you think would happen if? Or, what are the possible outcomes of this situation? And try to like edge them into like, oh yeah, I guess if I do this, two things could happen. And, how would you feel about that? And really pushing them, it's called like gist thinking. Like, how as an adult you kind of get gut feelings about stuff. Whereas teens are like hyper rational. And they always, because they're dopamine driven, they will always go towards the good outcome versus the potential bad outcome. Regardless of how bad the bad is, whatever promise at the other end is always more like alluring to them than whatever consequences coming with it. It's not that they don't understand consequences, because they totally do. They just, the weight on the positive outcome is more important to them.
That's
so I totally lost my train of thought where I was going to go with that.
No,
there
this
was
is
a
good.
point to it.
Well, it was modeling and then just thinking and
just
then
thinking. Yeah. So they're hyper rational, so they have to practice that just thinking. So, and teens care, you want to focus on like, how would you feel about that, or trying to almost attach like a morality to it, like, or a value. Like, it's because the I told you so or don't do this is not going to work. It's like, if you do this, it might affect someone else and they are going to feel like this, right? It's like, because they know like what kind of person do you want to show up in the world to be? Like, do you want to be a jerk to someone or do you not? And you really have to say that out loud and work through that process and like get them to tap into their gut feeling of things, because that's also going to keep them safe when they're with friends. And like, they're gonna bad choices are going to be all over the place that they could potentially make, but like help them listen to their gut.
It's like you don't necessarily want to be that voice in their head, but that sort of feeling in their gut.
Yeah, absolutely.
More
and we all
powerful.
eventually get it, but they have to practice it, right? So every opportunity you can for yourself, like, oh, I really want to do this, but I'm worried about this consequence or this. And like, my gut tells me that, X, Y, and Z, and try to just get them thinking about that like gut feeling. I don't know if you've read Untamed yet by Glennon Doyle.
I've listened to a podcast interview with her, and it sounds so cool.
It's such a good book, and there's so many good like parenting tidbits in there. And the one thing she talks about, not necessarily for parenting, but it's true for teens, is, she mostly talks about how women are really, we at a young age get caged, and then we don't know our knowing. You don't follow your knowing because you do what everyone else tells you to do, and you follow the rules and you stay in your box, you stay in your cage, versus like following your knowing, like what are you really passionate about, or what really feels right to you, and trying to help hone that.
And this kind of comes back to the essence, right? It's like that we don't want to stamp that out just because some elements of it of teenhood may be inconvenient to a family structure. And we're trying to, but I love the idea of just thinking, because essentially you're making transparent your own thought processes, your adult brain. And so the teen can see what's actually going on. So it's like, instead of just seeing you get mad and then leave the house, it's like, I'm feeling very stressed, I'm going to go for a walk, which is very different from, oh, she's mad and just kind of abandoning me, or whatever the motivation might be.
Totally. Yeah. It's really just getting into your head about all the things that, and we kind of take for granted that we're processing and going through. And it's really about just, you're almost being more mindful and more intentional about how you can model those behaviors. Because it's unrealistic to be like, you know what, I want to teach my teen this lesson, so we're going to sit down, I'm going to schedule a time, and I'm going to lay it out. That's not going to work, right? So it's taking the opportunity you have in like everyday basic activities that you can model that emotional like intelligence and being able to regulate it, and how to work through stress or difficult things.
Totally right. And it's also this idea of oh man, what was I going to say? Well, with the just thinking, it's like, so, I mean, not only are we saying things out loud and being transparent about it for the teen, but it's like this idea of like when you just tell somebody something versus acting it out and actually living. It's that example of, walk the walk kind of thing, right?
Totally.
So if you're like, when you're stressed, you go for a walk, like you said, you're going to be met with an eye roll because it's not convincing. But if you're doing it and it seems to work, and human brains are very interesting. We're different from animals because we have drama and we have imagination. And so we can watch other people acting in the world. And then we can, as you said, that whole idea of like, well, what would happen if this? How would you feel? We can project ourselves into the future to make present moment decisions versus other animals that have to act. And then if they fail, they die or they suffer a consequence. Like we can actually live 10 lives at the same time because we're watching other people or we're imagining things. And that's, part of the prefrontal cortex's role. And so this is the whole, like getting that activated and starting to work that muscle.
Yeah. It's so key. And the model thing that's really important is because the common thing that parents are always stressed with is social media and using their phones. And like, it's so stressful. And I get that because there definitely is risks associated for sure. And it's so new. And parents of teens right now didn't have it. So they are totally like, I don't know how to deal because I didn't ever have this experience. And I mean, it'd be also naive to think that any generation's adolescent experience is going to be the same as the next, because obviously things shift and change, but we just have to learn with it. And that's one of the biggest things is like, we get to learn, like figure out what Instagram is, figure out what Snapchat is. And it's also a sneaky way, I guess, of like engaging with your teen, like get them to show you how to use it. And they're probably going to tease you and eye roll at you, but they're going to do it. Right. So figure out Snapchat, figure out what's the new one, TikTok, like figure out, have fun, just get them to show you so that you can use it and start to figure out all the lingo and the short forms and like, because you do have to monitor it. If they're, and this is my theory, if you're like, oh, you want to give them privacy and space, it's like, but if they're posting on a public platform, you're totally allowed to monitor it. Also, are you paying for their phone? Are you paying for their data? Are you like, like there's a few things, and there's a lot that they have to learn. Like there's etiquette, and there's like more research showing like, so teens who are having kind of like happy, healthy relationships in person also typically tend to have happy, healthy social engagement. But if they're struggling at all in a social context, then they're probably going to have a more negative experience with social media. So you still have to, and they just don't get it. Like they're acting on impulse and they're going to post something negative, and you have to be like, hey, so there's just a lot of education that has to go instead of like, hey, here's your phone, see you later. Like I really do think you need to and work together, like, hey, if we're gonna have a phone, and always the best rationale is like start strict and then loosen as they prove responsibility, right? Because it's a huge privilege to have a phone, have access to social media, and it can definitely benefit them. And from like a social experience, like it's how their peers are staying connected, right? So, and really at the root of it, like teens aren't so much addicted to social media as they are addicted to, we have a visitor. This is my son, Miles. Oh, he's finding chicken eggs. Oh. I'm just on a call with Talia. Can you go find Dad? Okay, go. What? A snapping turtle. Awesome. That's what happens. Yeah. So anyways, when the phone comes out, first of all, prolong it as much as possible. Like until you really feel like they need it. I'm going to air quote that. But, and then really say like, okay, and work with them together. The more rules and guidelines you can build together and you each are compromising, the more likely it is that they're also going to follow them. And yeah, just really helping them walk through like practically, one good rule of thumb is like, before you post something, like think about it for a minute before you hit send or post. And like what kind of questions could you potentially ask yourself before like sending that? Like, is this going to hurt anyone's feelings? Is this who I want people to think that I am? Like kind of helping them have a process of working through it, of like, I had a few questions where, this is what I usually say, people like, who and what do you want to see? And like, are they appropriate and a true representation of who you are? Are your intentions good? And what effect might your words have on others? I mean, those are good skills, whether you're posting on social media or not, right? And that's how you start to get those, like hone those connections we're talking about of like, how do you engage socially in the world as a decent person, right? It's once it's posted, it's just, you can't take it back as easy. So you really have to help them practice, like going through that, like step-by-step process of just like, not just posting it. And then also like the other big factor people are worried about too is like, is this affecting, and not just teens, but adults, like with the perfect Instagram life, right? It's like more comparison, is it adding to their body image issues and like the dieting cultures that are out there and like all the negative things we want to scream from them so much that can really impact their mental wellness. So again, really talking like, well, what kind of stuff do you want to see? Like help them build their Instagram profile. Like what things make you feel good? Like when you see this person's posts, how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel good about yourself, or does it make you feel bad about yourself? And really help curate, like, yes, social media is everywhere, but you have the power to consume whatever content you want, and really trying to empower them to build the content they're viewing with as much control as possible, of like things that do make you feel good and that are inspiring and hopeful. And, are you using it as a way of connecting, and are you having like real connections with your friends? Because it can also help build friendships and build connections, which is so important, right? So it's just really helping them have a process to go through when they're posting and when they're engaging, and being intentional about it. Yeah.
It's like good advice for anyone on social
media.
Of
course it is, 100%, right? Because yeah. And often like check in, like, oh, like, what are you looking at? What are you engaging in on social media lately? Like, that's a good question to like at family dinners, like ask them, right? Like, who are you following? Like, what are they doing? What are they saying? How are they acting? How does it make you feel? Does that make you want to act that way? And try to engage in that as much as possible, just to help point out to them, like, oh, you keep saying that this person you're following makes you feel like this, maybe stop following them. Right? Or if you notice like someone trolling them or whatever, like help them report it and get that person off their list. Like, you're gonna have to kind of handhold that, because also teens do have a harder time being more assertive with like other adults, right? So to help them with that assertive communication, to respect their own boundaries as well. Yeah,
it's really important, right? Because I mean, our social media feed could be a source of happiness in our day, and essentially their images, right? And it's a point of connection. It's not really something we understand not having formed during that time, but there's obviously positive aspects to it, otherwise we wouldn't do it. And we are in control ultimately of our social media feeds. And so if it's making you depressed to be on Instagram, then we can start unfollowing some people that are making us feel that way. And I love the idea too of all the questions that you ask before, like, is this a reflection of who I am? And then also questioning other people's feeds, like, who are they, or what are they about? And engaging that conversation to really analyze these images. It's like, oh, I love this picture. When I look at it, I don't feel so great, because if I don't feel good about my body and I see this skinny quote unquote yoga body. It makes me feel kind
Yeah.
of sad. But what do you like about it? Well, I like the nature and the poses, and it's inspiring in some ways. And it's just like
Mhm.
parsing apart and figuring out why the image creates that spark of emotion that we get.
Yeah.
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 So important. But yeah, but yeah, it's a teamwork thing, and you have to, it's hard because we didn't grow up with it. And it's one of the, actually, when I work with families and we go through a program together, one of my pillars is social media literacy. Like it's literally part of their health foundation now, is to learn how to engage and learn how to show up on social media. And when they need a social media break, like a good rule of thumb to just start coaching them on, and I even do it with my younger children now, it's like, if you're on it virtual time for an hour, then you need a balance of having an hour of something else time, like outside, ideally doing another activity you like, ideally like trying to do something creative, like what other things can you do that can help you, because it's also that same dopamine hit. Every time you like look at a feed, it's a new thing, it's a new thing, it's a new thing. Dopamine, and that feels good. That's why people get addicted to things, because you're just getting this hit. So you really have to help them find other dopamine activities that make them feel good, right? It's usually creating something or learning a new skill or like nature or anything that's a bit more restorative is going to help for sure. And just really, and at first you might have to force it, like not force it, but that's a rule. And like really having family rules. And the number one thing is like, how are you as the parent using your device?
Right. Good
Because
point.
we're guilty of it too. And you're asking your teen, oh, put your phone down, I'm talking to you. And they're going to try and be like, well, then you put your phone down when you're talking to me. Because that happens a lot and we don't even notice it. Right. So it's really like, if you're going to make the rules, like you have to follow them too at this point, because you're no longer the adult that doesn't make any mistakes. Like when they're a child and they have you on this pedestal. I heard a great description of kind of what it's like as you become a teen. Remember like the Wizard of Oz, and there's the wizard behind the screen. And for the longest time, he's behind the curtain when they're children, pulling all the strings and doing all the things, and they're so enamored by him. But then they look behind the curtain and like, oh, you're just a person pulling strings. And that's kind of what happens, is they realize this, right? So, which is important, but it's also like, you really now can't just be like, do as I say anymore.
Absolutely right. Yeah, that's actually really important. I love the idea too of the rules being a negotiation that's family wide, that you adhere to, that the teens are also involved in creating, or at least understanding. And maybe you need to force like, okay, you're going to go paint now or go outside and get off your phone and engage in an activity that will still give you a dopamine hit, but requires more investment. And so it's not the same quick dopamine hit just because you're scrolling. You actually have to sit down and develop a skill, which doesn't have that same reward hit, right? Which
not as fast.
Yeah. So, but I love that, where it's like this collaboration that you're all engaging in, that's bettering the whole family. I mean, this is the theme of all these things. Yeah.
That really is what it is. Like, yes, I love working with teens and teen health, but really I work with the families, because it would be very rare that like a teen doesn't have any adults influencing them. Right? Like that's the reality. And we all have to be influenced, especially, and now like everything's amplified because they're stuck inside together.
Totally right. Yeah. Right. And now it's like, well, you're on the phone all day, but that's no, we can't really go outside.
I know. And that's the thing, is like, you're gonna have to, this is one thing I've been coaching on, is like, during this time, if anything, you actually are probably gonna be pushing your teens to be on social media more, but again, with what intention? Are you just sitting there scrolling at things you can't have right now and it's just bumming you out? Or using it to stay connected and stay social and stay engaged? Because those are two very different things, right? It's all in how you use it and how does that use make you feel. And as long as you can keep that at the core of like how you're using it and what you're doing it with, it really, they'll get there.
It's that self-awareness is at the core of emotional intelligence. It's like, how do my actions make me feel, as a form of like being able to regulate our emotions, basically, through our environment and what we choose to do and who we choose to follow and how we choose to engage in social media or any other activity.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just, there's lots of, big, really collaboration, I guess, is the best word to describe it. The more you can do things in anything with the team collaboratively, and let them practice their negotiating skills, and also lets them practice their decision-making ability, and lets them practice all these higher level things too. And then they're more apt to go along with it.
Right.
And then you have to do it too.
Right. And then, then the whole family is under the challenge of regulating social media use.
Yeah. It's tricky. It's definitely tricky.
And I think you said, well, one of the things that is showing up in my practice when it comes to teens is the stress, the unique stresses perhaps that they might be under compared to, I don't know, 20 years ago when I was a teen. And I don't know what you're seeing in practice or what you're noticing.
Yeah, there's definitely an increase in like anxiety. And mostly, I mean, those stats, like it's way higher in girls compared to boys. So the trends, like they're both increasing in both genders, but it's definitely more prevalent in the girls, and it's increasing faster. And what I'm seeing is it's sometimes an issue of overscheduling, right? And I'm going to reference Glennon Doyle again, because she talks about the memo you get as a parent and how the memos for our grandparents to our parents to us have changed. And like, you know, our grandparents' memo was like, take the kid home, let them speak when spoken to, and carry on. And then like the next generations is like, take this kid home, hang with people who also have kids, you know, drink wine after 5, and then carry on. But then our memo is like, you know, by the age of 4, are they speaking Mandarin? And do you have them registered in this? And are they doing this? And do they have a professional sport? And don't let them feel any pain. And they always have to be happy, and everything has to be perfect. And like, don't make them wait. And it's crazy, but it makes jerky adults when they're right. Like, this is the problem we're doing. It's like the whole millennial effect, right? Like when they're only expected to feel good all the time and not experience all the emotions, gets challenging. And then we're also overscheduling them, right? So they were only ever wanting to feel happy all the time, and now there's this idea of like this it's most when I see it's like this overperformance. They're stressed about like, I have to do this good and I have to get this grade, but I also have to do this well in this class in the arts and the sciences, and I'm doing this sport. And so, and it's we know we don't want our teens to be completely bored and have no structured programming, and we know that it's healthy for them to like be on a sports team and or like have extracurriculars is great because it keeps them safer, right? And it helps them form connection. But if they're over scheduled, then all those things are a stress, right? It's another task they have to do. So you need to find that balance of like unstructured time that they can spend with their friends versus structured time that is letting them like develop a new skill or something that they really are passionate about or finding joy in. And helping them figure out what that is for themselves and tapping into that knowing versus what you want them to do and what you think they should do.
Right.
And it's the hardest thing because obviously we all want them to be successful and right. And sometimes the picture of success, which is shifting, is like, well, you have to go to a professional school and you have to do this and make this much money and have this house and get married by this time and have kids by this time. And we have all these cultural, I read a book one time and he calls them bullshit rules. And like the rules of our society that make us think we have to do all these things. And it's kind of intense. Like it's getting worse for the teen population right now. And then you add in like the social media and the keeping up with the Joneses, like from a social media context, just like layers that on, like just everything in general is busier is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I'm seeing that too. And I think it's, you know, I mean, and it's difficult if you're a parent and you're like, I love hockey. I want my kid to be good at hockey. So you got to enroll them at age 5 and then they get to age 15. They're not super into it anymore.
Yeah.
And it's hard to let that go, you know?
Yeah.
And then as the teen, if you're in piano and you're in hockey and you're in, I don't know, dance, and those are all good things, but are you going to be perfect at all 3 of those things and school and confident with your friends and, I don't know, into nature and conservation? And then on your social media feed, are you following a hockey star and a dance star and a piano star and feeling bad because you don't measure up to any of those people, but that person dedicated all their time to that activity.
Yeah.
And then we get into comparison mind and that, yeah,
it's a lot. And not to say like stress sometimes gets a bad rap. Like it's not that stress is bad, because we know when we're pushed and there's a stressor, that actually is where we can have more exponential growth, and we learn about ourselves and we can do hard things. Like being able to do hard things is important. But if you're overscheduled and starting to impede their day to day, and it's going from stress to anxiety, which is a little bit different. Like a stressor is like, okay, I have these things to do. And like, yeah, you're worried about a test, or like, yeah, I have these stresses, but is it becoming like a fear or something that's like consistently on your mind that you can't focus on other tasks? That's when it becomes a problem. And that line is going to be different for every teen and every family.
Mm-hmm.
You know that if humans, adult individuals, some people can like handle more stressors and still be healthy and vital and not pushing that anxiety picture, whereas some people get there easier.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like finding that line of like, okay, what kind of support do you need, and what, just letting your teen be who they're going to be as a person and not who you want them to be.
Mm-hmm. Tough. It's hard.
It's super tough. It's easier said than done for sure. But yeah, definitely like anxiety is huge. Not huge right now, but it's definitely like it's on the uprise, and it's just they're overscheduled, and it's mostly the girls.
Right. And they're overscheduled, higher expectations for themselves as well, that I need to not only be good at this, but be happy about it.
Yeah, it's their self like expectations as well. So just trying to get real with them about like, is this, and sometimes, because there's sometimes the teens that come in and they're stressed, they don't know they're stressed. Right. And then you start to, but they don't know why they have a stomach ache or why they're getting headaches, or like there's physical signs and symptoms that they come in with, like, oh, I have a digestion issue, or I'm getting these frequent headaches. And then you look at her itinerary and you're like, okay, let's talk about this. Like, you know, and just almost like having them do thought exercises of like, you know, let's try to imagine what it would be like if we took some of these off your plate. Right. And I mean, depending on your relationship, some parents can do those thought exercises with their teens. Sometimes they need the third party. They need like a practitioner who can do it with them. Or, and somebody's a practitioner, it's important for teens to still have the elders of the tribe around on the outskirts, like keeping them safe while they're experimenting and trying these new things. So if it's not you, the parent, then try to make sure they have trusted adults. Is it a coach? Is it a practitioner? You know, is it an aunt or an uncle? Someone that you trust to give them like sound advice, but also someone that they can go to if they're not comfortable talking to you. Like, I would say that's also highly important, is to help your teen develop relationships with other adults that they can go to and that they trust and that you trust. Because they're not going to come to you with everything typically, but you want to know they have somewhere to go.
And I was just talking actually to Fernando, and he was saying it takes just one adult in someone's life to help, you know, combat addiction or mental health issues. Like one supportive adult decreases the risk of, I think it was suicide by 40% in the LGBT community. Yeah, for adolescents.
Right. Yeah.
So really powerful, like just having somebody. But if you have a support network, it's even better. Yeah.
And that's true at any age. Like, we all need support people. And this is also, I think, the struggle is like, we less and less are part of tribes or villages or whatever you want to call it, where like typically when you grew up in a village or whatever, or whatever you want to call it, you would have other elders around and there'd be other people. And it's not just one family unit trying to do it on their own. That's not how we're designed, right? Like, we need other people to help us do this thing called parenting, right? Like, and to like, it's true. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a family member, but just like someone that you trust, and build those relationships like as young as you can. Like, have those other adults in your life, like, and like the auntie persona, like, is amazing, right? Especially for a teen girl, like to have an aunt that you can go to and trust and talk to things about is so valuable.
Because it doesn't have the same pressure of mom, you know, and you know, there's a bit more freedom there and a bit more of a kind of like a friendship-y kind of energy you might get.
And what's interesting too is like, it's really important for teens to like go out and have their own little like pack of friends or tribe, whatever you want to call it. And girls especially, if one person in their group is suffering and talking about it, they all will suffer. Like, whatever, like if one person's having an issue, they all take it on, right? So if one of them can find an adult, but they also are so loyal to each other, they don't ever like, and teens will talk to each other about like even things really serious, like with anxiety often will come like self-harm issues. Like I've had patients and that's the case, and they're like, oh, my friend's doing this, but she told me not to tell anyone, and I know she's struggling. So like that's always tricky, and they want to tell a parent, and there's so many layers to it. But if they can try to find a trusted adult, like first of all, don't ever just start calling everyone else's parents and like ratting on them. Don't do that. Help your daughter find a way to help her friend by like getting her friend to tell another adult. Because then you keep your lines of trust open. Like you're not going to go behind her back and be like, oh, well, I called your friend's mom, because that's your gut instinct, because you're worried and you're concerned and you want them to be okay. But like you really also want your teen to be able to come to you with challenging things. And if you right away go behind their back and like call the person they asked you not to call, then they're probably not going to come back to you. So it's really like, and your job as a parent is helping your teen, right? So how can I help my teen get through it? And is it talking to someone else, or like coaching her through it? Like, okay, how do you have this assertive yet friendly conversation with your good friend about how she needs to get help? Because like you care about your friend and you can't like, right? So having those tricky conversations.
Yeah, it's like,
but that's on the rise, is like, especially the self-harm thing in young girls.
And it's also important just to be aware of that, like how important the friend group is, that because it's
so important,
right,
like for young teens.
Yeah, like as adults, I mean, if if someone in your social circle is suffering, there's concern and there's pain around that for sure, but there's a little bit of separation as an adult. Like we understand that that's an adult, I'm an adult, and we both are dealing with our lives, and the way that we support others is usually with a little bit of a boundary, right? Like, are you okay? Like, can I do anything? With teens, if they're taking it on as if it's their issue. And we might not even recognize that or remember how strong it is. And I think I've seen that in my patients too, where if they have a close friend who's dealing with mental health issues, it's really distressing for them to.
No, it consumes them as well, and they lose sleep over it, even though they're not the one who has the actual whatever's going on. But they'll lose sleep, they'll have a hard time staying on top of their schoolwork, and they'll be like, you'll notice their change too, like something's going on, like they're stressed. And so just trying to create that safe space, whether it's with you or if they have their own counselor or practitioner that they can talk to them to, and help develop a plan of like, okay, how are we going to help this person, but like maintain loyalty and like maintain my tribe, because it's so important for them, wading through the social waters of adolescence. So
Totally. It's a really good point to bring up, right? Because we wouldn't necessarily think of it. It's like, oh, that's too bad for your friend, but really seeing that it's actually impacting your teen to a huge extent as well.
And just you want them. And the biggest thing is because a lot of parents, their immediate reaction is like, if your kid were to come tell you, oh, my friend is, unless, I should say the caveat is, unless there's obviously like there's a imminent danger, like they have a plan for suicide. Yes, immediately you need to intervene, because that's like a big safety issue. That would be the one, right? Like that's a big thing. Like if your teen says like, my friend's like going to take their life tonight, then you're going to intervene, of course, in whatever manner possible, because at the end of the day, the safety of that person is the most important. But like if it's like eating disorders are a big one, and the self-harm, if it's self-harm, not that none of it is okay, but long as it's not like I'm going to end my life, but it's they're cutting or something to that nature, then you really want to help coach your teen how to talk to that friend for them to seek help from an adult. Just to maintain all the like the boundaries around it, and to maintain your relationship. And it also empowers your teen, and she learns how to help a friend also, right? And it gives them a chance to practice assertive communication, which we do a crap job of teaching our girls to do. Like that assertive communication style, that's like, you're not being bitchy or whatever the story is around strong women, but like how to have an assertive communication style and to be able to set safe boundaries for yourself. And like, it's just a really good practice.
Mm-hmm.
But and early intervention is key. So always keeping those gates open. And even at the beginning of adolescence, like, hey, I know that like you're gonna see friends suffer and you're gonna see things, like, come tell me and I will help you figure it out. I don't want you to ever be scared to come to me. Or like sometimes families will make not code words or code names, but just like kind of have a policy of like, okay, if something scary is going on, but you don't necessarily want to tell me, you can come to me and say, something scary is going on. I need a referral. I need help. I won't dig. I won't ask for questions. I won't pry, but I will get you what you need.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of setting those guidelines out from the beginning so that they know, even like when it comes, like if you're at a party and you know you don't have a safe ride home, or the party, whatever you got yourself into, you're not feeling comfortable, but you don't want to deal with ramifications of getting in trouble,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like pick a safe word, and it could be like I can't even think of one right now, but just like,
Banana.
one good one was like, oh mom, call home and say, I left my hair straightener on or something. Can you turn it off?
Mm-hmm.
And then the parent can pretend to like be upset at them, be like an eye roll, whatever. And you can hang up your phone, right? And then the parent knows I have to come pick you up, and I'm not going to go in and like drag you out of the party or make a scene, but like you've called me.
Mm-hmm.
Also know like we're going to have to talk about it at some point, but I'm not going to grill you, and there's not going to like, I want you to be able to call me. So trying to set up those kind of like safe zones, I guess, so that
like,
they have safe access.
we definitely don't want to punish good behavior or like productive actions, right?
Yeah.
Healthy actions.
Especially when they're like listening to their just thinking and they're like, oh, I know this isn't a great position. I don't feel comfortable here, but I'm scared to get in trouble. I'm scared of the punishment. It's like, no, we want you to be able to call. We want you to like listen to that gut feeling of like what's safe and what's not. And we don't want to punish that. Like, yeah, we might need to have a bigger conversation the next day or a couple days later. Like, how'd you get there? Like, how'd this transpire? Like, is this commonly happening? Like, they're not going to get away with all things scot-free, but like, it's going to be a conversation. It's not going to just be like, well, I'm just going to come and pull you out of the party and like have a big fit about it. Trying to maintain our cool as much as possible.
It's almost like a debrief, right? Because the lesson may have been learned, and you can unpack that and figure that out. Because if the teen is using their just thinking and they've decided that situation is no longer one that they want to be in, then maybe that's done, and there doesn't need to be a rule, because they've now figured that out, and then the conversation can be around how to create a boundary, move forward, or whatever it needs to be.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's so important. It's all about transparency and just being honest and open and vulnerable, and like, and own up to your own mistakes as a parent. Like, I said this and acted this way, and I don't like how it made you feel. I don't like how it made me feel. Like, how can we remedy this? Just like leading by example all the time.
Right. It's like a spiritual practice having a teen.
Yeah, it really is. It's like, okay, I'm gonna have some personal growth here too, going through this process.
Totally. And when we started this conversation, you're saying what many people do is like grin and bear it and hope it ends, and it ends however it ends, and maybe the spark dies, that novelty seeking also goes, maybe they're like a little bit calmer, but you miss these opportunities for major growth.
Yeah, and especially like typically when our teens leaving the house these days, they're typically going to post-secondary education of some kind or to a job, right? And all of a sudden they're like thrust into adulthood, and it's like if they haven't had any of those practice, you bet it's going to be more challenging, right? Like that was my experience. Like I went to university, didn't have any of this. It was just like, keep all the secrets from your parents, don't tell them. Like no one talks to you about emotional regulation or like how to create safe boundaries or anything. And then you get to university and you're just like, holy shit, like this is a whole different level, right? And it was a struggle. And then I suffered from depression and eating disorder, but like had no like safe space to fall back to either. I read a really great analogy. I love it. It's like your dynamic is like a pool, and the parents are the walls of the pool, and the world is the water. And your teens they can swim now, so they're in the water and they're playing and they're with their friends. But sometimes they need to take a breather and they hop on the wall and catch their breath, and then they push back in and they go and they play and whatever. So it's kind of, you have to be like the pool wall and be there to catch them. But you can't, you have to do it by being open and being there and having these discussions. and personal growth. Like you have to have emotional intelligence and you have to know how to emotionally regulate as well. So sometimes that's the first step, is like, okay, you as a parent maybe need to see the counselor, the practitioner, and like work through your own processes to like pass them on, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. It's this idea of what our experience could be a reflection of ourselves, right? It's like that whole idea of like, what can I contribute to this situation, or how can I, look at myself and how I am influencing this. I love that analogy of the pool and the walls. It makes a lot of sense, right? And, we think university students, when they begin, are still teens, still 18.
Especially 19. Now. Yeah, when I went, it was like, I think I was 19, but now kids are like as young as 17. Being like, see ya, I'll have to live on my own and feed myself and all these things.
And you talked about how, the pruning process really can continue until the mid-20s, like age 24, 25. And so, if somebody is just used to following external rules, and then you get to university where there are none, and you haven't practiced that just thinking and working on that pruning process, it can be really rough.
Yeah, it doesn't make it easier. And it's just, and you're adding more stressors, right? So like, what's your resiliency to all those stressors? Like, what's your foundation, right? And it's just like the whole foundation of health and being a model. Like, are you eating well? Are you moving well? Are you sleeping well? Like those core foundations of health, like, are all wrapped up in how we communicate with our teens too. But and really modeling that, so that when they go off, like, they have those foundations of health. And if they learn it as a teen, they understand they're not going to always follow it and do it, of course, because they want to push the boundaries, and and you have to let them feel and experience, like, oh, when I eat like this, I feel like this, but when I eat like this, I feel better. And they have to experiment that and figure it out. But I truly believe, like, when you've given them, at least shown them that foundation, they're going to go through a period where they're going to experiment, but they're going to fall back to it, and they're going to have access to it for the rest of their life. Like, it's going to be there waiting for them. Right. And they can fall back to it once they've done their experimenting and felt all the other things. Right.
It's really important, right? Like, I think a lot of adulthood chronic anxiety or panic and phobia, a lot of people have never had the experience of emotional regulation, and it was never modeled. And so there is really nowhere to go, or there's nowhere to, like, you think of like Shavasana after yoga class. You could be spending your day stressed out, and then you get into your relaxation pose, and you're like, oh, that's right, I was carrying all this hidden tension. Now that I'm in this completely relaxed state, or as relaxed as I can get to, this is sort of what it feels like to be more relaxed. And a lot of us never get that to that place where we can fully let go, because there's nothing to catch us. There are no pool walls. And so creating them is very powerful for regulating someone's nervous system. And so the water can get turbulent, and you might not see the teen clinging to the walls for years or whatever, but they know the walls are there because they're there.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's so important. It's just, like I said before, this window of adolescence is just, it can be an opportunity, and it's time sensitive. Like, not that it's ever too late, and I would never say that, and we can always shift and change and grow our mindset, but like, we just have this huge opportunity, especially like from a bigger world view. If we can hone this essence of adolescence, and we can encourage this vitality and this bigger thinking and pushing us to the box, and really let those things like bloom, then we can change the world. Like, the world needs to shift or do something, and the secret is in the youth. Like, that sounds cliche, but it's true. And if we can just, from a basic level, teach them emotional regulation and the nervous systems, and we can let them be creative and be who they are, and not be super anxious or super depressed or all of these things, then they can do that. They can be the world changers, right? Like, from a bigger perspective.
It's so great. Yeah. Because a big theme right now for especially that I'm noticing, women in their 30s and 40s, there's a lot of themes around unraveling the conditioning, right? Untamed, stepping out of the matrix. We're hearing different ways to describe this. And so if we can prevent that conditioning from even happening, or that containment, or those narratives that are externally instilled on people, we're really dampening out someone's spark, while also teaching emotional regulation and emotional intelligence. That could be a very powerful generation.
Yeah, that's what, fingers crossed. That's my purpose.
I mean, that's what you're here for, Erin. This is what you're
change the whole next generation.
Yeah. And can you also have a program? Is that something that you offer online or?
Yeah. So I'm actually right now I mostly see families like 1-to-1, but in July, so it's not official yet, but I am going to launch a group program that's meant for teens just to help them work through this, because what we do know is that community medicine, and it's huge right now, is powerful. And teens especially, they need, like, they want to depend on their friends. They want to talk to their peers about stuff. They don't want to talk to adults. But if we can have an elder, like at least one adult with a group of teens, so they can connect together, we can work through stuff. We can teach them the foundations of health. Like, basically the idea of this program is like, if you could think back to when you were a teen, what do you wish you could have known or done or learned to help you be a more successful adult, to help alleviate any of this, like the huge, not that you shouldn't struggle, but like, what were things that you probably could have done without? Like, did you have a mental illness that rampaged for 10 years? Like, what can we do to look back, and like, what could you have been offered as a support, and what could you have known as a foundation to really set you up to deal with all of life? Right. So that's kind of the idea of it. But yeah, no, right now the program I put people through is my 1-to-1 program, and I call it like the teen resiliency method. And that's really what we're doing is we work through certain pillars of health in the family unit during this critical window of time to really help build that out.
Amazing. Yeah, with all the pillars of nutrition and social media, as you said, and all of these things to form the whole person.
Exactly. Totally. Yeah.
Very
and
cool.
I recently put out, and it's free, people can grab it. It's more kind of what we talked about, but there's little like snippets. It's like a 5-day challenge. It's just how to connect with your teen. So kind of more tips and tricks than what we talked about, like the name it to tame it's in there, and like, here's some things we can work through. And then I created a Facebook group for parents who have teens. We can put the links in your show notes or down below in the links, and people can hop in there. And it's just a place that I'm starting to curate. I'm starting to interview people just to give people like more information. We love information these days, but just also a space to connect. It's like, because this is the thing. You can listen to all the experts and you can listen to all my examples, but like when you're in it and trying it, like sometimes you're like, oh my God, I tried this, it's just not working, I'm not getting anywhere. I just need to reach out to the community. And which is why I'm trying to create this group for parents. Like, okay, I tried this and this and this, and Johnny said this, and Sally's doing this, and I just can't break through. Like, what have you tried? And just a space to start having those discussions of like, with like-minded parents, like, I'm trying this, I'm trying to build the emotional regulation, I'm trying to work through this, but like, obviously you probably have your own work to do. So it's kind of a space where we can start to do that.
It's really important.
We'll put the links in. Yeah.
So the links will be there for the Facebook group and for your challenge,
Awesome.
and your website and everything. And yeah, I love that, because it's like, I've been met with so many eye rolls, and it's supposed to be working by now. And and just to get some tips on that, like, what, is there anything else I can do, or is it just a matter of time and just plugging away? As you said, it's not going to be it's patience.
It is patience, it's time, and it's practice. It's a skill, and it's not, you're never get this notion of doing it perfectly or doing it right. And I say this all the time, is like, I don't ever expect anyone to show up and do it perfectly. That would be ridiculous. So you can't just be a perfect parent, because you're human and we're going to fuck up. Like, that's straight up what's going to happen. But what we can do is recognize that we fucked up, and we can course correct.
Right.
That's all I'm asking you to do. Right. It's just like, hey, I screwed up. What can I do to fix it? And that's also amazing modeling for your team. Keep showing up, keep trying, keep putting in the effort. When you mess up, it's an opportunity to learn. That's really all the great, like, that's what we're trying to teach people, is like, don't get stuck in this perfectionist model, which is common. Our teen girls with anxiety is like, it's got to be just like this. It's like, no, it's the effort that matters, and keep showing up.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That's awesome. All right, Erin. Any last thoughts?
I mean, I have lots. I love teen health, and I just, like I said, it's just this, I want to shift how we view teenagehood. Like, people are scared of it, and like, they start talking when their kids are young, like, oh God, or like, oh, this is going to be harder. Oh, the teenage years. I was like, can we just stop? Like, I'm not saying that's not hard, and I'm not saying don't say, oh, this is challenging, because it is. but can we shift it to a more positive, like, and look at it as an opportunity? It's going to be hard, of course, because life is hard. Things are hard. Trying new things is hard. But can we stop just assuming like, oh, it's their raging hormones, or oh, it's this, and they're just a teenager and they're immature? And can we let go of that story and just look at what's happening from a developmental process and just help foster it? And just kind of look at it from that positive perspective and learn, like, okay, what's going on? How can I understand what's going on? Like, why is this behavior happening that's really triggering and frustrating to deal with? And then what can we do?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I love it. I love this whole conversation. Thank you, Erin, so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. It was so fun.
Awesome.